I'm Supermoon Tarot, and in today's video we are going to be talking about spiritual upgrades with my BFF Manman. Hello! I have got photos for you guys. I have an interview with the spirit guide that does the majority of my spiritual upgrades. I'm going to be talking about what is it, how does it work, my first experience, and the other spiritual upgrades I've done. But before we get into that, I just want to say I am over the moon with how well the other videos I've recently done have been going, the spiritual talk ones, because I've been wanting to talk about these topics for a very long time, and I just wasn't quite sure how you guys would receive it or how open you were. But I went blah blah angels, and you went 16 eyes 4 wings, give me more. So here we go. Consider this the beginning of a beautiful long journey. I have so much more to say on a lot of topics. So speaking of which, before we get into today's video, I'm going to be going over 3 options that we're going to choose from for next week's video. These 3 options at some point will be covered, but I want to pick the most popular one to give you whatever's the most, fascinating or necessary to your life, right away. So 3 options. 1, cord cutting. This can be between you and someone else. It could be a friend, it could be family, it could be a romantic partner, whoever it may be. It could be for good experiences, bad experiences, how common this is, how to get rid of it, why you want to get rid of it, what is it exactly. Option number 2, past lives. A lot of people think that past lives, well, I can't say a lot of people, I've often heard people describe past life as like an interesting memory, but some past lives can still be affecting you right now and can be the cause of irrational fears and anxieties and a mountain of other stuff. And so I want to talk about what it is, how to heal it, the different kinds, all that good jazz. And the 3rd one is getting into the flow. What is the flow? How we are all actually on a subconscious level kind of striving for it. This is when everything seems to be going your way. How can you get into it? What could be blocking you from it? All that. So those options are going to be in the comment section down below. You just thumb up the one that's the most, interesting to you, and I'll be going over that next week. So, spiritual upgrades. What is a spiritual upgrade? So, at some point in your life, this isn't the case for everyone, but for a lot of people, you will have some form of spiritual epiphany or revelation. Now, when we say spirituality, this is not about believing in something enough. This could range from topics like really deeply fathoming the idea that we are all one, to something more personal where maybe you've always had trouble letting go of things and you've gained some sort of pivotal information that now enables you to let things roll off your shoulder a lot easier. It's pretty broad in range and pretty nuanced. You'd be surprised how small or how big, or it doesn't really matter is what I'm saying, if what can cause this to happen. But whatever it may be, this now new information you're holding no longer is compatible with this version of you. And you need the upgrade. If you don't receive the upgrade, this is when people start to sometimes feel physical issues or emotional, like feeling anxious and stuff like that. I mean, it can be a variety of things. It's not always the case. I want to be perfectly clear about that. It is not always the case. Spiritual upgrades are actually quite rare. But anyways, this happens, so a spirit guide steps in. I'm using that term loosely. I'm going to be going over specifics later. But a spirit guide steps in and then will, add something to your spiritual form. We're not talking about physical. We leave that alone. You're not going to feel this. It's not going to be uncomfortable or anything. You most likely wouldn't even know it has happened. And they will do something to change you into the new version that's more compatible with that information. So that's the general gist and procedure of it all. So now let's get into my first experience and opening up to all of this. To make this make more sense, I'm going to explain that I am a channeler, which essentially means that I can receive messages from the spirit realm and spirit guides and stuff like that, and that's majority of other stuff, without having to be in a certain trance state. Like, I don't have to go into a deep meditative state, and I don't have to take anything in order to receive these messages. A lot of you will already know this when you see me do my tarot. I often am talking to my spirit guides in order to gain more insight. I love it. It's the best. I highly recommend everyone do it. But anyways, this then allows me to have a developed third eye where without even going to the spirit realm, I can basically like see stuff. And so one night I'm in bed, I'm kind of like half falling asleep. I'm not in a lucid dreaming state. I'm like pretty awake, but I know I'm going to be falling asleep probably in the next like hour or something like that. And I look down, and right around here, I see one of my animal spirit guides. Yes, animal spirit guides can also do these procedures. And the way that it looked was, it was kind of raised above out of my physical form. There were 4 layers. And then stemming from the head of my spirit guide was 4 different heads. On each level, they seemed to be doing something different. So on one level, they were weaving something. On another, they were rearranging stuff. On another, they were adding different components or something like that. And I just looked down and was like, what are you doing? Now, the great thing about spiritual upgrades is you will notice a dramatic difference in the effectiveness of maybe something that's been like holding you back for a while. You'll just notice, again, I'm just using it as an example of letting go. You're really making an effort to try to let go. Something clicks and makes sense, but it's after the spiritual upgrade that you're like, whoa, I mean, I don't know what it is. I just woke up one day and I just was over it. I got over it. I was ready. That's a good example of what it feels like after it's done. Again, you will not physically feel anything. I just noticed it happening, and they wanted me to see that it was happening to explain that it's a thing. Again, I'm going to repeat this. I say this in every video. This information is available for everyone. You can go and explore it yourself. But the reason why it's not something that's privy to everyone's knowledge is it just depends on how comfortable you are with this information. The spirit realm, they do not want to freak you out. So it's kind of like a need to know basis, but once they see that you can handle it and you're going to be okay with it, they'll be like, yeah, sure, let me tell you how many times you've been spiritually upgraded and so on and so forth. So now I'm going to be looking down. You'll see me occasionally checking my notes. I'm going to be looking at an interview I did with the spirit guide that does the majority of my upgrades. So I asked, do spirit upgrades happen for everyone? And they said no. They said, in fact, out of the entire population as a whole, only 50 to 60% of people will potentially get even one spiritual upgrade in their entire lifetime. Like I said, it is rare, and I do want to be clear about this. It cannot be forced. I suppose you could make an effort if you're just trying to actively self-improve, but even if you make huge kind of steps in your spiritual growth, it doesn't always mean you'll be spiritually upgraded. And I also want to be clear about something else, that this is not a competitive thing. Just because someone has maybe more spiritual upgrades than you or something like that, that would kind of defeat the whole purpose of spirituality. There's no hierarchy, you know what I mean? So keep in mind, something that got upgraded for you compared to someone else, maybe your upgrade affected you deeper, and you know what I mean? Like, I just want to stay away from the words like more or leveling up. It's kind of hard to avoid not expressing those words when you're trying to find the vocabulary for it, but please don't view it that way with other people. That is really not the whole goal and aim of it. It's more of a comfortability thing as you evolve. Anyways, going on to that. So the 50-60% that's upgraded, they said that it does fluctuate depending on the generation, because some generations are more open than others, which I think is really interesting. They said that anything can trigger a spiritual upgrade. Anything. It can be very, very small, something so minute you didn't even realize it was some form of revelation or something you took in, and that can make it go. They quote, my spirit guide quote unquote said, spiritual upgrades pop up when you can no longer embody the current version of yourself, so you have to be upgraded to the next version of yourself. Now, within that percentage that could potentially be upgraded, they said the average person will then just automatically get upgraded between 1 to 3 times. Again, it's just a case-by-case situation. Then people who are like actively working on themselves and trying to improve as a person. And again, we're describing spirituality as in like trying to understand other people, trying to understand yourself, kind of taking a more objective third-party perspective in the world, connecting to your higher self, things like that of that nature. But they can be used in a very practical day-to-day sense, essentially. Anyways, you don't have to believe in the spiritual realm to still do spiritual-like things without even being aware of it. People who are actively working on themselves will be upgraded an average of anywhere from 10 to 14 times in their lifetime, we're talking about. So then I asked, well, do they need to give some form of permission? Because you'd be surprised how much your subconscious is actually already hanging out and talking to a lot of these beings, not all the time, but it happens more than you think. And they said, no, it is mandatory that you get this. They said that if you do not receive this upgrade, it is, and I quote, extremely detrimental. Now keep in mind, you couldn't avoid it or push it off more for a very long time, like it just isn't possible. But if there is resistance, this is when you start to feel physically something's kind of like off. And it can start to kind of manifest in ways that are like, whoa, where did this come out of nowhere? Why am I dealing with this now? It's because you're sort of kind of resisting on a subconscious level, and then they will come in and upgrade you and make it all more comfortable for you. But they said the reason why this can happen is it's a type of self-defense mechanism. So the way, okay, this is, I'm gonna do the best to explain this idea. So when some concepts are being understood on a spiritual level, sorry I have to use that word so many times, there might be many different perspectives that all add up to have the concept fully realized. This is one of those examples. So it was described to me that you, like as a humans, we function in a sort of tandem relationship between our body, mind, and spirit. But keep in mind, that is not the only way we can function and are put together. So keep in mind, if you imagine like this is the whole concept of us, this is just one lane and perspective and one way of existing. So I just wanted you to keep that in mind, because as we continue our spiritual talks, you know, we can build upon this idea. Anyways, so you have your body, mind, and spirit all working together. And when your body feels like it's going to be changed or replaced, it wants to either stick with something that it's familiar with. It's like, I don't want something new. I don't want this upgrade. Or it thinks that it's calling the shots. And the way that my spirit guide expressed this idea, they said, no matter what, while they are all working together, your spiritual self is always the pilot. So if your mind and body start taking too much control, this is when people make a lot of like nonsensical decisions, is the only way I can put it. I am so sorry I keep touching my face. I keep having a hair go into my mouth over and over again. Anyway, so then going on from this, they said that anyone can receive an upgrade from anything from a spirit of a planet to a spirit of a plant to a more human-y spiritual guide to a more animal spirit guide. Whatever it is just about the right person, the right being of energy and vibration being matched for the right situation. Now I want to explain this a little more because this is so exciting. I love getting into this. This is an important concept that is a huge, like, description and way of looking at the spirit realm. So often when we get into spirituality, we're not fully aware of how it functions. We're just excited that it does. We're excited when we see something. And this is all good. This is all the kind of opening, beginning stages of this journey. But everything happens for a rhyme and a reason. There is a method to the madness. So if you see an image, let's say in like a vision or a dream, it is actually a physical personification of an equation or a geometric shape. Everything can be explained in a mathematical, or we'll just say loosely, science-y method and way. And you need to receive this sort of equation and idea through, like, let's say you see a flower. You're both receiving information from the way the flower looks. as well as the equation that it's holding all together. It's like a whole thing. So spirit guides, all of them, often represent an idea or a concept. Now keep in mind, we're going to get into this a lot more detailed in another video with like over spirit guides and stuff like that. Each spirit guide does not individually hold one idea for everybody. If you meet them, you might have one kind of connection with them and that idea, and then when that spirit guide is like looking over someone else, they might have a different kind of connection and idea they're representing, so that makes sense. But the point being is, whatever the upgrade is, you have the correlating, physical manifestation of the equation idea that needs to, think of like math plus math equals answer, and your new body and the way you function is the answer. So I hope that made sense. Let's talk spiritual anatomy. So as you can see here, it is a loose drawing of what's going on in the inside. If I drew an accurate, like detailed every single layer, that would take a lot of time and research, and well, you get the gist. Now consider this, remember how we were speaking before, the main concept and idea of being a human is there's different components and you need to understand separately in order for the whole idea to be comprehended and make sense. So on one level, we talked about how we function as mind, body, and spirit. Well, on another part of the missing puzzle piece, we have these shenanigans going on. So my spirit guide said that we have 37 layers comprised within us. And those 37 layers are divided amongst 5 sections. The amount of layers per section varies. And the 5 sections are your energy section. This would be where your energy is received, computed, projected out, all that jazz. The second one is your celestial section. Now this is when we get into sort of a yogi territory. I actually didn't know anything about this until they told me to look it up, but this is when different layers act as like a philosophy that also has capabilities. So this is where your astral body would come from. It represents an idea, but it also enables you to astral project. Now it's important to understand, this goes back to the idea we were talking about before, is that philosophies can take physical shapes that can also be represented as equations. Do you see how everything's starting to kind of flow together? You get what I'm saying? Going on, the physical body, and the fourth is the mind body. Now the mind body is pretty interesting because they had difficulty putting this into words. This is one of those situations where it was better expressed through vibration, and the only way they could kind of put vocabulary to it was explaining that it's your intellectual logical side and your intuition side, but so blended together that it would be too oversimplified to say logic and intuition, but that's the general gist. They describe this as your core being, and they do not touch this part of you. It's incredibly rare. I mean, we already talked about how rare it is to get spiritual upgrades. It's even rarer that they would touch this, because this is your core being and personality and how you are the different version of you in your decision making and where you want to put your attention, stuff like that. They're not trying to change your personality. They're just trying to make you more compatible with your information. And last is the 5th section, which is the void section. Now, this made me laugh how they described it. They said they do the most amount of work here. This is the space between the spiritual realm and your physical form. This is where a lot of the sort of wiring and sort of little plugs and screws they put in, I'm just giving sort of human words to what they do. They described it as the boiler room. And this is why they do the most amount of work here. And I said, is it similar to when you have a bunch of wires sticking out from your like TV and electronics and then you shove it behind the sort of the TV stand? And they were like, exactly. So that made me laugh. Now that you understand how we are made up, let's talk about the process. So as I spoke about, my first experience with the spiritual upgrade was witnessing my spirit guide work on 4 different levels. Now this is not the only amount of levels they work on. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but everything is done for a reason. Now to give this better clarity, I want to go over why things look the way they do. If you look at this couch, you are picking up whatever color it looks like, you're picking up the material, you're kind of thinking about how much it weighs. By viewing it, you're taking in information. Now, here's sort of an example to break this up. It doesn't, when you pick up spiritual information, it doesn't always exist on 4 levels, but here's just an example. So the way, and this is something I discovered when I was in the spirit realm and I could like see multiple layers of my spirit guides and stuff like this, and they then explained all this to me. So there's 4 different layers here, and you will notice that it's the same equation on each layer. These layers exist again through sort of like, kind of like a dimensional thing. It's like on top of itself, if that makes sense. And while this is all the same layer, because it exists on a different plane of existence, it takes on sort of a new property. So maybe this equation smells like strawberries. This equation loves to look at the sky. I'm giving it a personality. Anyway, you get the gist. The way they interact with one another, bouncing around, this one interacting with this one interacting with that one, them all interacting with it as a whole, they then take on new properties, and then this is how an idea then gets represented in a physical form. So in the spirit realm, not only are you witnessing something like a couch, you might be taking in a whole metaphor for a way of life or something like that. And again, I'm super generalizing this, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. This is important to understand because when they work on these spiritual upgrades, they will pick a certain layer of numbers. And when they pick that, like example 4 is usually the most common one they said they work with, is because it represents the idea of structure. So they are literally working with the idea of structure, because this concept is not only working as a metaphor, but the metaphor also takes on an equation, which then affects the equation they're working on. You get what I'm saying? Is this all adding up, I hope? So I worked very hard to make sure this all comes together in a fluid way. So they said 4 is the most common, but they can work on less or more. Now, I was getting into greater detail with them and saying, like, so do they ever just do the same spiritual upgrade over and over again? And they said no. Every single one is custom, tailored, and specialized per person. It's a big deal for them. They love doing it so much because they have existed for eons. New things are exciting for them, so they take it very seriously because they care about us, but also they want to do the research. They want to learn something new, and because each scenario and each upgrade is its own thing, and they don't really, they got to do their research before they do it. It's just fun and exciting and new for them. Now, my spirit guide went into greater detail saying that it's a whole process for them. They said on one hand, it's kind of like an experienced computer technician looking at a bunch of wires. They have enough experience that if they follow the sort of workings of it, they can kind of start to be like, oh yeah, this probably fits here, this works here. They can make some pretty good hunches, but they don't kind of mess around and just see what happens. It's not random. There's a certain level of being able to navigate your spiritual form very easily with their experience. But on the other hand, they said that they look up your entire history as a person. They also described it as the timelines. They said they'll look at if they move this sort of wire here or weave this there, then what will happen in the timeline if they do that. And they go over every single possibility to make sure that when they put you together, it's all working and flowing and is the right choice and decision. They also always, even though they're very familiar with how we are put together, they always brush up on their history. So I thought that was really great. And finally, they said that they like to do these spiritual upgrades mostly at night. There are the occasional emergency daytime ones they do, but the reason why they perform these at night is your subconscious is the most relaxed and open to receiving the work they've done and deal with the integration easiest. Now, I asked how long do these integrations take? This is something that when you go into your spiritual experience, you'll find as a thing. We can change things and we can fix things, but there's an integration time before it really sinks in, and this varies. So for spiritual upgrades, they said the average time is usually 6 months before you really feel the full effects of what has been done to you. But it can be less time or more time depending on how open or resistant you are. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now I'm going to share a couple of my firsthand accounts doing spiritual upgrades for other people. Now I want to be clear about this. This cannot be something you can request or forced. It just happens. It's been rare for me when I've come across it, but it's amazing and I want to talk about it. This very first story I'm going to go over is the first time I did a spiritual upgrade, unbeknownst to me, but then I later had it confirmed. Anyway, I was speaking to someone and they were telling me about their chronic fatigue they were dealing with. They had trouble getting over to the spirit realm. In general, they just kind of felt down. And I was like, let me just check in and see what's going on. And I'm thinking I'm going to come across a past life that needs to be crossed over, you know, like a soul fragment needing to be, you know, put back in or something like that. And I got something else. So with my third eye, I was then able to see, and I'm going to put a picture here, a silhouette version of them trying to escape their being. And I could look through the silhouette and see like galaxies and stars and space. It was magical, but it was very confusing, especially because at this point, the most amount of knowledge I thought this could have, that I thought this could have been, would have been an attachment. But attachments are usually trying to stick to the body, not escape it. So this is then when without even asking, my spirit guide that does the majority of my upgrades popped up and was like, we're going to be doing an emergency upgrade. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So they then explained to me that this was their astral form. And this part of them, as we discussed from the celestial section of ourselves, was gaining a consciousness and was trying to escape because they were afraid they would no longer be able to kind of go out into the world in the way they wanted to, and kind of started to fear that they were going to be caged in. And it was a very one-track minded perspective. Now, the way that my spirit guide explained it to me was it's similar to like if your lung gained a consciousness and tried to leave. It's like, lung, you won't be able to even be you outside of the body, and I need you too. They are meant to be all incorporated together. This is then when me and the other person had to sort of talk down this astral form. We had to let it know, like, hey, when you chill out and you get back into the body, this is not the end, this is the beginning. You can travel all you want, you just kind of need to be back in your form, don't worry, whatever it needed to hear. And after it chilled out and relaxed into the body, this is when my spirit guide got to work starting to do a weaving technique and sort of attaching it back to the physical form. I was, you know, telling it what to do, where to go, and I initially thought, oh cool, I'm so glad my spirit guide could pop up and help you. And after I was done, they were like, we did that. That was your first, you know, upgrade. And I was like, cool. And I'm really happy to say the integration for this other person was remarkably quick. I saw them pep up immediately afterwards. Their symptoms went away and they were able to travel to the spiritual realm a lot easier after that, which I'm very happy to talk about. Now, another one I did was someone was complaining about upper back problem. Again, I want to be clear. Did not think it was going to have anything to do with the spiritual upgrade, but it was. So the way it looked like would be like some sort of like chamber, a tiny, smaller, thinner chamber, bigger chamber, and this went on for, I think I want to say about like 6 chambers. And this is what it looked like when I was looking at my third eye into their back. I want to be clear, I'm aware this is not the physical representation of them. This is sort of a spiritual body thing. Anyway, when I was looking into it, I could see all of this dark sort of webbing, tar. It looked rotted. It didn't look good. And my spirit guide explained, this was actually another spirit guide I was working with in order to do this, explained that the person had overcome their issues with not trusting their intuition. They finally were like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm no longer like that. I'm going to trust myself. And even though they had finally trusted themselves, they had been giving into fear for quite a while in such a strong state that when that no longer was being fueled, it no longer was like attacking them, but kind of had stuck to them. It was kind of like the residue left over, and the residue was hurting them, and like we said, it was giving them back pain. So then we sort of went in, me and my spirit guide, and we removed all of this stuff chamber by chamber, and we put it in this kind of like basket. We could describe this as like a Mary Poppins infinite basket that, you know, you never see the bottom of. Interestingly enough, when we were removing it, it was like all one long strip of like a never-ending curtain that we added in there. Eventually, we got to the second to last chamber, and there was a hole that was plugged up with some of this like webby material. And my spirit guide said, if you remove that too quickly, it will sort of, the best way I can explain is there's stuff on the outside, we don't want it coming in here. They're meant to be separate. And so when we removed it, we froze time, and then we did a weaving pattern, which I'm very happy to say my spirit guide wanted me to share. So this is what it looks like. Now this weaving pattern, this again goes back to the idea of everything has a reason. This top shape means a certain equation, an idea. This other line over here in the middle is another concept and idea, and then the bottom layer is another philosophy and equation idea. And they're all being woven together to create a new concept with the way they're interacting. This was, I don't know exactly what it meant, but I do remember what it physically looks like. And then this idea, if it was woven, I told the person who was laying down, I said, hey, I did this to you, accept this, imagine receiving it. They then received it. I watched it, you know, fill up and block the area that had the hole in it, and then we removed the rest of the material. We put love and light around all of the chambers, and their back felt better about 2 hours later, which is awesome. And then the last one, which is also a weird one, was again, same concept. There was some discomfort in the forearm. Again, I don't know if these are going to be upgrades when they're going to be upgrades. I actually don't know if I remember the cause for this one. All I know is that it looked really bizarre. It looked like this. There were these tubes that had been ripped and all of these orange little balls around it. This is again third eye looking into the spiritual body of the forearm. And I just simply pushed my fingers over it to connect it, and then this is something that's really fun about when you work with this stuff. You'll just say stuff and be connected to stuff without, like, you're just like, I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I did that. And this was one of those moments where I went, this is going to feel weird. I didn't know it was going to feel weird. And I went like this, and I started to put these little orange balls back into the tubes so they were all connected. And I literally watched the person go, oh, this is weird. And once it was in there, I had to do, and I apologize, I would share this with you if I remembered. This was a while ago. Again, this doesn't happen very often. I had to do a certain type of hand rotation in order to reactivate the energy and have these little things, these little orange balls moving around properly and circulating the way they needed to do that. Do I exactly know why that was the case? No, I just knew I needed to do that, and every time I have done an upgrade, I've always checked with my spirit guides to make absolutely sure that I did it correctly and everything is okay. And if you might say, well then how did you know that you did it correctly if it just happened in the moment? Spirit guides exist on multiple planes of time. They know stuff before we know stuff, so most likely they wanted me to do the upgrade. They did the research, they kind of mentored and oversaw me doing it. I did it, they confirmed it because they had already done the research, and yeah, and also they know how the body functions. They can see when something's off or wrong. So anyway, that's spiritual upgrades. It's a wild thing that I've seen give a lot of positive results to people. It's really cool to know that there is an explanation as to why we can feel so different at different times in our life, and it's just something I don't really hear a lot of people talk about, so I thought I'd share it today. Please, for the love of this video, please give this video a like. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this. I genuinely would love to know. And please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Me and Mon are wishing you the best. Bye!